everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. My name's Kyle Anderson. Thank you for listening. Folks, we're in the middle of spooky season. It's Nerdoween, as we call it here at Nerdist. So I'm very excited to continue to talk about the things that I enjoy the most, which is horror and spooky goodness. This week we're going to talk about the kind of growing subgenre of horror known as folk horror, and kind of the resurgence, I guess the surge that it's having currently in our horror society. And to join me to talk about that is returning champion Maggie Mae Fish, who you know from her own channel and also various things on Nebula, which you can subscribe to at nebula.tv. Hi, Maggie. Welcome back to the show.
It's so wonderful. I don't know who I beat to be a champion, but good.
Well,
I
you
deserve
returned
to
so
win.
automatically.
Yes.
Any returning person is a champion. But yeah, like I'm very happy. Last time, if you know this, but listeners, Maggie was on a few months ago to talk about her David Lynch podcast and also about David Lynch in general. You are, as we talked about last time, like you started with the more normal David Lynch movies and are getting weirder and weirder and weirder. So how has that journey been since the last time we talked?
Oh, it's been, we're finally, I think, in the golden era where yes, so great. Just watch Mulholland Drive.
Hell yeah.
I mean, we're in it. What a wild, beautiful movie.
It's true. God bless David Lynch. Obviously David Lynch is, a legend, and so we will protect him at all costs. But I was trying to think if there was has he done anything even remotely close to folk horror? And I don't believe so. And it's
I don't believe so.
I don't think he, but it's because he's so industrial. And I think that is like the antithesis of what most folk horror is, which is very much about the old ways, which I think is really fun. And so for anybody who doesn't really know, you probably have seen a folk horror movie, even if you didn't realize that it was one. It sort of these movies got sort of tagged after the fact, the way that film noir was not called film noir at the time, that kind of thing. And so I guess we can sort of give credit to the term folk horror to documentarians Mark Gatiss and Jonathan Rigby, who made a documentary in 2015 or something like that, looking at it was History of Horror, which they made for the BBC, and their second episode was all about home counties horror, so it was all British horror. And they cite the three pillars of folk horror as 1968's Witchfinder General, 1971's The Blood on Satan's Claw, and 1973's The Wicker Man. Which I think is a really interesting trio of movies because they're all different types of they all have different focuses.
Yes, it's interesting. A lot of people who talk about folk horror, and even the director of Blood on Satan's Claw said that folk horror has nothing to do with the plot. Plot can be anything, but it is aesthetic driven.
Yes,
which I both totally agree with, and also there are similar themes that pop up, especially the idea of the outsider and the town versus the city. Which again, why do we see resurgences? Why do we see it growing? It's very pertinent to many historical things.
What was we're going to talk about all sorts of these folk horror movies. And even if you haven't seen them, folks listening, there's maybe make a list of all these movies if you want to watch them, because they're all really fascinating in their own ways. And some of them are, like all movies, are more successful than others. But what was your introduction? What was the first folk horror movie you saw, and what was the first movie you saw that you knew was a folk horror movie?
Wow! Oh,
those are two separate questions.
Fantastic questions, though. Wow. I'm trying to think of what my first folk horror movie would be. The Neverending Story. I'm kidding.
Yeah, right.
I do feel like a lot of kids media because it is very folksy, telling parables to kids. There's usually some sort of element of that. Obviously, films darken that with a very eerie to a very eerie ending. But yeah, wow, the very first, man. Maybe it was Wicker Man.
I think because that was mine as well. I watched
Okay,
Wicker
yeah.
Man in college well before I even knew what folklore,
Mhm.
well before the term even
Mhm.
existed, really. And so it's interesting to like go, okay, that's one of the three, the big major three, but like,
Mhm.
and boy, does that movie hold up. Like I watched it last year
Ah,
and it still holds
uh,
up so crazy well.
it's one of I love it. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, it's so good and like
It's
so
so good.
upsetting. So like, okay, so what about the Wicker
Mhm.
Man speaks to you? Um,
Mhm.
so how do we want to do this? I guess we could talk about a little bit like what that movie kind of represents, which is this police officer from Scotland Yard who is
Mhm.
very like uptight, very kind of puritanical, and
Yes.
specifically very Catholic, who
Yes,
goes to
God-fearing.
yes,
Yes. Mhm.
who goes to this small island because he gets reports that this girl has been kidnapped, this young girl, and so he goes to like
Mhm.
save the day kind of thing, and then he finds out that this is a pagan society. It's like they're modern, it's the
Mhm.
1970s, but like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're doing maypole dancing, and it's very much about like the harvest and copulating in the streets and stuff like that, like, and he just
Mhm.
finds it so egregious and ghastly and everything like that, and uh, eventually you find out. I don't want to give away the ending because it's one of the best endings ever, but
Mhm.
like that the town is sort of, they know what they're doing when it comes to getting somebody to come to the island, and
Yes.
specifically who they're getting and
Yes.
everything.
Mhm.
So like that it's an upsetting movie, maybe the first time you watch it. And the ending, of course, is very upsetting. But every time I watch it since then, I am absolutely on the side of the townsfolk. Like,
Yes, every time you rewatch it, you see
yeah.
more of what they're bringing to the table.
Yeah.
There's a lot of women making their own choices, just
Yeah,
like
absolutely. Yeah.
a lot of things that it's really funny. So, this is a 70s movie. A lot of these quintessential folk
Hmm.
horror take place in the 70s, which is very interesting, both because a lot of these were made in conjunction with the sexual revolution. Some of them talking about, the failures of the sexual revolution. Some of them celebrating the new freedoms discovered during the sexual revolution. But yeah, you see this coded as like pagan, satanic, some other code of ethics that is often painted as very backwards, that yeah goes against the established often Christian religion of the area. But yeah, so at the time, it was like teenagers experimenting with their sexuality, in both good and not great ways. So yeah, a lot of these films speak directly to that anxiety and the idea of doing something different than your parents, the previous generation, is expecting you to do. And maybe them seeing it as regressive, but you feeling free, or vice versa.
Mm,
I think Blood on Satan's Claw toes the line. Like you could watch it and be like, "Oh yes, thank goodness those good Christians were
I
there
know.
to."
Yeah.
Yeah, you could do it either, but on the other hand, it is yeah, teenagers, like, discovering and embracing their freedom outside of this extremely, like, strict, misogynist, anti-queer, structure of society. So, yeah, it's very interesting, very central to a lot of things what that was happening at the time. But, yeah, give it an old-timey veneer
Hmm.
and, some creepy music, and then voila, you got a you got a folk horror.
There's a lot of these too that are like what I like to call like daytime horror. And by that I mean like the horror doesn't
Mm,
matter what time of day it is. Like it's all sort of
yeah.
like, and the Wicker Man famously ends with like this processional that like right as the sun is going down, but it's all in the bright lights
Mhm.
of this happy, like harvest festival dance kind of thing, or I guess it's plant seeding or whatever, but like um all in service of getting their apple crops to come back. And it's like it is
Mhm.
they always say that old time religion, but it's literally pre-Christian religions that are so scary to kind of the Christian religion. Like there's a reason
Yeah.
why what we think of, or what kind of cropped up as um folk horror, started as a movement in British film, because like there was
Mhm.
so much history, kind of pre-Roman history in the UK, but then also like obviously when Christianity and then later when the Norman invasion, like there's just this deluge of Christianity just coming into the country, that it's sort of like what's out in the sticks is sort of like backwards and weird, and they still like cast lots and stuff like that, weird stuff that people who grew up in the city don't have to deal with, and everything like that. But what you were saying about the youth is like both of those movies, and I think they're really good in conversation with each other, because like you're right, one is very much like the youth are being seduced by Satan and it's bad, and the other one is like just let people live, and it's this puritanical guy who's bad.
Right.
But also like they do kill him at the end. Spoilers.
They do kill him at the end. They
Yeah.
do. They do. Yeah, it is, fascinating. Yeah, that they seem to be in conversation. Yeah, they kind of are the two sides of the coin of the time. And also like specifically it's starting in England. Yeah, it has all that rich history that they're drawing from. It has even like physical remnants of before Christianity. Like the fairy circles in Ireland. There's these like physical reminders of a time when, I guess if you're like a white man who
I am.
loves oh yeah. Well, a white man who loves Jesus. That might not be okay.
Okay.
Yeah, not you. Your twin, your evil twin, who how threatening that would be to see a like physical reminder that you were once not like this so pivotal to the way that this world works. That's why, you often see a lot of like feminine elements in like Blood and Satan's Claw. You have the seducer. In the VVitch, you have like the opposite. Yeah, she's not a seducer, but it's her, in a way, rebelling and discovering her freedom-ish.
Yeah.
But you often have the inherent transgression of the female body, witches, yada yada. Yeah, that's kind of wrapped into the fear of the other more base religions from their point of view. But you see that element in a lot of these folk horror discussions, because there is something fun and cool and mysterious and probably very scary too.
There's, and it's like, it's also like the land itself too is sort of scary at a certain point, like because in Blood on Satan's Claw, like all the evil sort of starts because this farmer is out digging in a field and finds this weird kind of effigy, like corpse, essentially like this of a skull with an eye in it and everything like that of this animal. And then eventually as the movie goes on, like you find out that thing is taking parts of these young people and like becoming like a fully fledged like devil. I mean, he's supposed to be the devil. It's the most interesting like looking version of the devil I think I've ever seen on screen, because it's not a goat. It's not, there's not red guy with pitchfork. It's very much like just this guy in a this thing in a cloak or whatever. But and so there's the aspect too of like the surrounding area is, if you're out too far from the city, it's like it's forest, like there's evil wolves in the forest. I just recently watched The Company of Wolves, which I'd never seen before, which is sort of I guess you'd maybe call it folk horror. It's sort of like it's a fairy tale horror, I guess, if there is such a thing. It's sort of like Red Riding Hood as a version of Red Riding Hood, where the wolf represents the evils of men, specifically that want to feed on young girls for their nubility and things like that. Is that a word? Nubileness? Youth.
Flexibility? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, why not? But I find that's, and like, there's the animal masks in the Wicker Man too, where it's like, let's commune with nature in this fashion.
Yes. I will say, like, I think one of the secret reasons I love folk horror so much is inclusion of animals. Often I love animals. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just fun to see them on screen. And again, folk horror yeah, part of that fear is, yeah, the animal nature inside us, reflected in the animals.
Mm,
And again, yes, the setting, looking more at the witch, however one would want to say it.
sure.
Yeah, and the way it circles around the goat, and the pasture and like the emptiness of the area. All of that, contributes to the main character, our main character's feelings. And yeah, the environments we see them kind of spread out from, yeah, our the characters surrounding. So yeah, I like how New York is like a fifth Sex and the City character.
Sure.
Yeah, for folk horror, yeah, it's like a field and gross little animals that are
Mm.
coming to tell you something bad is about to happen.
Yeah, there's an element of like communing with nature as being horrible because like there's so much in the Wicker Man too where like he digs up what he
Hmm.
thinks is the grave of the girl and there's just
Right.
a dead jackrabbit in there and it's sort of like, oh, it's like
Hmm.
disgusting. It's a crime against God, I guess. But like
Hmm.
it's, animals are, as big a part of nature as humanity as ought to be. There's that argument that
Yes.
like we are
Hmm.
destroying nature by building on it and everything like that.
Hmm. Yeah, but
Um,
also it speaks the tension of, in Christianity, there's supposed to be like the lords over the beasts.
right,
So
right.
then the fear, yes, of the opposite would be that these beasts, yeah, have a place in society. That, yeah, more than we give them credit for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it's usually like
interesting.
old timey depictions of the devil are always farm animals or like, it's the goat,
Hmm.
like when in The Witch and the VVitch. You know what we're
Hmm.
talking about, folks. It's that
You
Robert Eggers movie.
know.
Um, but, but Black Phillip is a goat, and that's like they used to call him their various terms for the devil are like the goat of Mendes, I think is what it's called. But like
Mm-hmm.
the depiction of the goat with the horns that go around kind of is a very,
Hmm.
if you've seen Long Legs, there's a lot of that imagery in it. Have you seen Long Legs yet?
I haven't yet. It's
Okay,
on my
I
list.
won't give
Yeah.
anything away,
Okay.
but
Okay. Good to
the
know
version
though.
of the devil you see
Mhm.
drawn in that is
Ooh.
that version with the goat and everything like that.
Wow. Okay.
Anyway,
Mhm.
but what I think, so the Wicker Man and Blood on Satan's Claw, I think work as a good one too. But the Witchfinder General was the one that actually came first, and that one is just
Mhm.
basically about a horrible real person. Matthew Hopkins was a real guy who was
Mhm.
a witch, a self-proclaimed witch hunter. Uh,
Mhm.
in during the Civil War in the 1600s in England, and just went around the pasture and like decided who was a witch and who wasn't a witch, and it sort of like what the Crucible is in American like history, literature. This is
Yeah.
sort of the English version, which is a lot more, I guess, like um I don't even know what, like literally he would just come to towns and be like, you're a witch and
Right.
you're a witch and you're a
Right.
witch and
There were no rumors,
no,
no Tatuba, yeah, no, yeah, girls having too much time to themselves. Yeah,
no,
it's just
no.
you over there,
Y-
dead. Yeah.
yeah. And like he was
Mhm.
just a truly terrible person and like got away with it.
Mhm.
But so that movie there is no, like, it's all just the corruption of humanity. And then Blood on Satan's
Mhm.
Claw there is the evil of the devil corrupting the youth in as manifest by these women who are trying to seduce priests and things like that.
Mhm.
And then you have the Wicker Man, which is it's the puritanical guy who is he's our main character, but he's the one who's actually causing the problems. And I think it's really funny that
Right.
like Britt Eklund is like spending nights because she's the tavern wench or whatever that uh,
Mhm.
at the inn where he's staying, and every night she tries to like sing to him to like seduce him, but he's a
Mhm.
virgin and he's engaged. And it's the fact that he doesn't give in to that, the fact that he stays true to his own beliefs, that actually is what gives him the downfall, because it's like, we chose the right guy,
Right.
which I think is so
Right.
cool. I think that's such a
It's so
great like
cool.
yeah,
Yes. I also love how many times the, townspeople tell him to leave.
yeah,
It's like 5 or 6. They tell him to get out of here, and
yeah.
he is like, "Absolutely not." And they're like, "Okay, well." Yeah, it was interesting to talk about like resurgence of folklore,
Yeah.
or like the reappreciation of it, which, I mean, due to many, many reasons, I'm sure. But yeah, I mean, we still very much feel, especially I think for our generation, the like leaving the church in droves,
Mm.
and that inherent anxiety, but also like political anxiety, of groupthink and things like that are cropping back up, unfortunately, into our zeitgeist. And we need outlets for it.
Mm.
And what a beautiful genre to explore that in. But also, besides the aesthetic, yeah, I mean, earlier talking about the environment having such a big impact on folklore. And I was earlier today thinking about, the second Candyman, or the most recent Candyman.
Oh, got it. Mm-hmm.
How, yeah, like, on paper, some people do define horror, or folk horror, as horror that invokes folk passing down of stories,
Mm-hmm.
which, is not in every single folk horror, and is not aesthetic based. But yeah, in Candyman, it has many of the same themes of folk horror. It, is a story that they pass on to one another, and it is the environment that creates this that this monster lives in. And a lot of the visuals of the movie, very beautifully horrifically shot.
Mm.
But yeah, instead of the fields, it is, the cold brick of the side of a building, what you can't see. Yeah. So, there are things that are very core to folk horror that I think we are just I don't know, something really hits like the human psyche. But yeah, you start seeing it pop up in a lot of horror films. Long legs, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to give that away, but that
Sorry to give it away.
but it is in the zeitgeist, and I wonder too if
Mhm.
it's like, now that we have given it a name, I guess people can go, oh, I'm going to make a folk
Mhm.
horror movie, and it's not just I'm going to make a movie
Yes.
about this thing, and kind of it's more abstract. You can
Yes.
say like, like there were zombie movies before George Romero, but like once he made movies, it was
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm going to do that. Like there's sort
Right,
of, and I wonder
right.
if The Witch was sort of, I don't know if it's the one, because there were ones before that.
Mhm.
But that was the one to me that was like, you are taking the time to make a folk tale about these specific
Mhm.
people, and it is horrific and everything. And that is absolutely like everything we've been talking about is this like super Puritan, literally Puritans, but like even more puritanical
Mhm.
than the Puritans. Like that's the whole point, is that the
Yes.
family is too strict even for the Puritans.
Yes.
So they have to go live in the forest. And I love that each member of the family, with the exception of Thomason, which is Anya Taylor-Joy's character, Anya,
Mhm.
excuse me, that's the way she pronounces it, is jealous of her in some fashion, or fixated on her in some
Yeah.
fashion, hence
Mhm.
committing one of the seven deadly sins. I love it. Um
Mhm.
but it's just being like, to your point earlier, like it's through no fault of her own. She's just a girl. Like
She's
she's
just
just
a
living her life.
girl.
She just happens to
Yeah.
be at the stage in life when she starts to develop, and like her mom is jealous of her, her
Mhm.
brother is like lusting after her and all this stuff, and her
Yeah.
father thinks that she's like, you know um doing
Like
bad and stuff
luring
like that, and
men.
it's just like
Yeah.
he's not
Yeah.
doing anything, like
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's speaking to, again, like the horror of the environment.
yeah.
Like that also feels like an environmental horror, like the way that the people around you, through no fault of your own, see you or treat you. And yeah, how that's echoed in the landscape that the movie takes place in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
funny too that like it's called The Witch, and there is a witch in it, unambiguously an actual witch, but she's
Mhm.
not really the corrupting element. That's the bit that I think is really
No.
fun about that, is like this family was
Yeah.
pretty screwed up to begin with.
Yeah, it's almost
Um,
like, yeah, they push her
right.
into this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very interesting. Again, like fun modern take on, yeah, these very yeah, puritanical, very strict ideas of how to run society and
Mhm.
each other. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the animals bit, because like I remember the first posters that came out. There's the one poster that's Black Phillip, the goat, but then there's another one that's just a rabbit's head, or just something. Like I'm trying to remember some of the other ones when it's just like, or the raven. Like there's the whole scene with the raven, which is just one of the most disgusting, horrifying like cuts I've ever seen. But there's so much about that. It's the woods. It's like you're being you are encroaching upon this. It's not that it's not the thing's fault for like luring you in. It's like you are on their turf essentially.
Right.
Which I think that movie fits so well into the big three, I guess. Like there's obviously some offshoots that are more like psychedelic. Have you seen either of these movies? But have you seen Ben Wheatley's A Field in England?
Ooh, I don't think so.
Or one that came out, he made during COVID, and then like it came out during COVID, called In the Earth, I think is what it's called.
Yes. Okay. Actually, I have seen A Field in England, but I've not seen his new one.
Yeah, In the Earth is what it's called.
Right.
And it's about like that one is about them these scientists getting lost in a field, and like finding this like obelisk essentially, and like trying to figure out what it is, and it like has a weird effect on them. But the same with The Field in England, where it's just like that movie is really crazy because they eat magic mushrooms and like completely lose their mind, and it's all just sort of but that does count. That counts as a folk horror because it takes place in the same period of time, even though it's very like modern in the way it's depicting things. But
yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see, because right now, when we talk about folk horror, it ends up being very England centric,
yes,
and yes, for yeah, but yeah, I am very curious and interested to see, how see the genre, continue to be applied to different types of movies, different types of stories. Um, just because I think there is it's a very universal experience, and what we label as folk horror, is often because of the aesthetic. But yeah, at the end of the day, there is a lot of stories like that. Yeah.
There, Severin Films, which is a Blu-ray company, they put out a box set a couple years ago called oh gosh, I forget what the box set is called. All the thing. Who cares? It doesn't matter. It's a big folk horror box set. All the Haunts Be Ours is what it's called. And it's a huge box set of like 20 to 25 different folk horror movies, and some are like TV specials and stuff like that from all over the place. There's a lot of English in there, but there's some like Canadian or like Australian like Aboriginal stuff, and like there's Italian and Spanish, and like all over the place. And I find that really interesting because like you see how the different cultures like have their own folklore. And there's a second volume coming out soon as well.
Wow. Not sponsored, but I will be buying.
Right, exactly. It's so good. But there's a lot of like,
that's great.
You can see how like Swedish and Norwegian folk horror is sort of like based in, kind of more ghostly, and Japanese folk horror also is like very kind of based in kind of spirits and yokai and things. And
yes. Yeah, I was going to say that I get like a random modern take of a folk horror, The Ring.
Yeah.
Which is based off of a very modern Japanese film, but it's still about the anxiety of the old versus the new, this time in technology. But very.
Have you seen I'm just going to say, this is going to be the have you seen section of the podcast. The Korean movie The Wailing.
No.
Okay.
Ooh.
That's another one I would highly recommend. It is very
wonderful. Great.
It is about a small kind of South Korean small village that where people are doing horrible things to each other, and this police officer who's kind of a dope has to try to figure out what's going on, and a bunch of people think, oh, it's all this Japanese guy who showed up, it's his fault, like, and then you find out that there is a corrupting like actual evil presence involved, and it's a great slow burn kind of horror movie, which I think is on like anywhere you can stream things. But that's another one that like it's just about the outsider. That's like you said earlier, that's a huge part of it, whether you are the outsider or whether
There is an
there is an
outsider.
outside element coming in. I think that's the raddest part of the whole thing. Ancientness and modernity, and then also just like, who is this weirdo coming in from the whatever. What are some
and
of
why do they believe what they believe?
Right. You are different from me.
And why am I so normal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that's funny to me. I mean, that's, you were saying it's like very of the time now, and it's completely true that like everyone's sort of accusing each other of everything, and it's like, you're different from me, ergo you must be evil and bad and everything like that. And it's just, it's gotten to that kind of level of kind of moronicness.
And also the wanting to understand why someone thinks the way they do. Yeah, which like I think is in history we love, just chalking it up to their religion, their whatever it is about them. Well, that's why. Which usually isn't. It's actually usually the environment that influences us. Much like the genre argues. Yeah, really very fascinating. In a bad way.
in a bad way, yeah. To live in normal times
horror,
again. Yeah. Yeah, I'm tired of living in a horror movie. I really would rather go back to living in a
Yeah. I
don't even know what. Just a drama. That'd be nice. Or comedy. I'd actually like to live in a comedy. Just because things tend to be okay in a comedy. I don't know.
I think some people are living in a comedy, but
that's true.
I don't think they know much about what's going on in the outside world.
No, that's true. What are some of your other kind of folk horror? What are some of the things that drew you to the genre, and what are some other movies that you are drawn to in that way?
Well, I think it was interesting. We spoke about it earlier, and I don't really even think I made this connection until now. But yeah, the presence of a lot of women in folk horror films. Just kind of standard with just gender coding. There is a lot of feminine protagonists, I guess, in horror in generally, but especially in folk horror, and often women, whether they are evil or the main character, that they still have power. They have agency usually in these films. In Blood on Saint's Claw, it's about them losing that. But either way, they're at some point they have some sort of sway or effect on their environment, whether it's at the beginning and they're the seductress, or it's at the end and it's a good for her film. But I think unconsciously, I do think that is a draw for a lot of people for folk horror. And there's something about the discussions of patriarchy that again feel very very apt. Again, thinking of the VVitch, that's very central to a lot of the core problems of the film, problems for the main character. And also, I mean, I grew up in rural Michigan, so I do think a part of it is, I mean, there is nothing scarier than being next to like an abandoned cornfield, being in a cornfield. Even during the daytime. Again, speaking of daytime horror, it's both nothing, and also you can't tell what's there because it's corn. You can't see through it. That fear of the unknown, the unseen. Your neighbor is far away. Like weird noises take on like just a whole other like menacing feeling. When there's like an absence of people, which we often see in folk horror, it is interesting, because people are often the things that we find horrific, the other, being the other, but also it's the absence of people, because at the end of the day, we do have each other. We are a community, whether we want to invent things or not to divide us. At the end of the day, we are technically supposed to be all on the same team, surviving on this weird planet together. And when you take that element out of it, what's left but that hostile environment? So I also think it's a very flexible genre. As we said, it is both defined and undefined. You can use elements of it in your, completely modern horror. But Yeah, I think that is an exciting thing about the genre. That yeah, I'm always willing to sit down and watch a folk horror film. Oh, a what do you call it? Like a weird pick I'll throw in
Sure.
is
Love a weird.
pumpkin. Yeah, a pumpkin head.
Pumpkinhead, yes,
Yes,
100%.
yes. Which I think I would consider that a folk
I would.
horror.
Yeah.
Yeah, evil entity. Yeah, discussing the idea of revenge. Even that's somewhat maybe not in the text, but yeah, is very much like kind of a religious thing. Like, what is it good or is it bad? It feels good, but I'm told it's bad. Yeah, this like corrupting element. This other. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. I return to
Yeah.
that movie a lot.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I was thinking about that one too when I was prepping for this, and I
Mhm.
didn't have a chance to rewatch it, but, like, I
Mhm.
it's that is a good example of, like, Appalachian kind of folk horror because which
Yeah.
obviously, I don't think Pumpkinhead is a real piece of, folklore
Right.
or anything like that, but the idea
Mhm.
that this guy just knew to go to this, like, old woman and be like, "I need to get revenge on these city folk." And she's like,
Mhm.
"Okay, but you gotta know what you're
Okay.
getting into," kinda thing, and, like, yeah, it's one
Mhm.
of the best, like, creature features or just creature designs just ever.
Yes.
The great
Yeah.
Stan Winston, of course, but
Mhm.
yeah, truly a
Yeah.
good movie and,
Good man.
but
Highly recommend if you've
yeah.
missed it. I admit, before I'd seen it, no one was telling me to watch
Yeah.
Pumpkinhead.
I think it's fun too to, like, retroactively go like, "Oh, that's a folk horror movie," or, you can
Yeah,
kind of, like,
totally.
lump those things in 'cause again, I don't think
Mhm.
anyone would necessarily think that that's what that was, but, like, Children of the Corn, I think, is a good example of, like, that movie is series is bad, but, like, the idea of, like, these kids, like, worshiping this entity that sort of just lives out in the corn that is of the
Mhm.
earth and beyond it and all this stuff, I think is really, like, exactly what folk horror is.
Mhm, absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great I mean, again, oftentimes they'll use, like, femininity as kind of a stand-in for that, but to have, like, kids be the like, uh, people that can't think for themselves and, like, easily corruptible and also scary and, like, there's a lot wrapped up into that. It's a fun take on, yeah, the common tropes.
Mm.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
I just brought up a list of them, so I'm gonna, like, shout out some of these ones
Ooh.
if we can talk
Ooh.
about them if you want, but, like,
Mhm.
technically, like, Sleepy Hollow or,
Oh,
uh,
sure.
what was the other one I just saw? Like, even the Blair Witch Project, even though they made that up, that's still sort of like it's a found footage movie
Mhm.
inside of a folk horror kind of setting, I think.
Yes, yes. But if one of those teenagers in Blood on Satan's Claw was given a camera
Right.
and, like, ran out,
Totally.
yeah, that would kinda yeah,
Yeah.
similarity, yeah.
Um, but that's
That is
always some
actually
go ahead, please.
oh, sorry, I was gonna say that's actually also a good, example of, like, a modern take on it because it's like they're fleeing to the woods,
Mm,
they're suburban kids, city, safe, going into the woods, which danger. Yeah, very much yeah,
yeah.
classic. Mhm,
Yeah. Here's a kind of just an abstract question. Do you think
mhm,
witches, the way I guess people in the West kind of consider what witches are, is that inherently
mhm.
sort of a folk horror take? Or does it have to kind of be
Ooh,
even more kind of outre? Does that make sense?
that is a good question. I think probably yes, in that the idea of witches is kind of formed against the idea of Christianity and,
Mm,
a priest man centric order of the universe. So I think it will always be a as seen as like an opposition or an answer to that. So yeah, I think kind of anytime we want to discuss um either actually Christianity or any religion or anything that models itself after that history, then yeah, I think witches are apt. Absolutely. But yeah, I also do think that there is a lot of wiggle room. Also, like you said, a lot of like the idea of which is invented, but there are real religions that would be considered, yeah, like witchcraft or othered, that, yeah, I'm sure do have very terrible films made about them that are very inaccurate and horrible, but, hopefully also great films, like The Wicker Man, maybe making a
Mm.
case for why they're not so different than before. And even in The Wicker Man, a lot of the rituals are real rituals that, were pre-Celtic society, in Scotland, and actually, I only know this, I'm working on a video on The Wicker Man,
Oh, okay.
so yeah, I happen to have done a lot of research accidentally. But yeah, the director did that on purpose, and also Scotland at the time was extremely Christian,
Yeah.
so yeah, this was him, just kind of making and doesn't take either side, I don't think he is religious at all, but yeah, it's kinda like, yeah, it's not really all that different. Or if it is, yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So yeah, he based Wicker Man is based off of real rituals that
Mm.
were done in the past. But yeah, it's to say there's that all the way to yeah, like our modern day witches, like a Hereditary is one that I think, it's a
Right.
very nebulous idea of which and cult ends up, so yeah, that I feel is a little more using witch as a stand-in, whereas Wicker Man is using like actual rituals. Um, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do think that's really interesting. The way that filmmakers what they choose. Yeah, whether it is uh a real belief, a real system of beliefs, or if it's a fake story that's been passed on, like in Pumpkinhead, or a real story that has been passed down in cultures. Yeah, yeah, very, very interesting.
Yeah. The
Mhm.
Hereditary is and also that leads also into Midsommar, which is super folk
Mhm.
horror-y. But I think
Yeah.
in both of those cases it's like there's a cult aspect of it, not
Mhm.
literal like, like Jonestown type cult, but like
Mhm.
the idea that there is a group of people with like who are serving this, whether it be the
Mhm.
entity in which I at one point I knew what specific hell demon they were worshiping. Um
Dope.
Gosh, I can't remember anymore. But and then in Midsummer it's sort of just like the sun itself essentially,
Mhm.
like um
Mhm.
that there's so much of like, again, we're talking about like uh kind of egalitarian societies. There's as many women as men in both of those.
Mhm.
The women are often given, especially in Midsummer, like higher status. Um,
Mhm.
and they commune together. Like, a part of me wonders if like,
Mhm.
actually, if you've seen, uh, Beau is Afraid, which is the other Ari Aster movie, like,
Ah,
I think he
uh-huh.
is afraid of women in power. I think that's
I
the
think
point of
so
that
too.
movie.
I think that's
Um,
right.
but like the idea of like the mothers or like, like
Mhm.
the women in Midsummer who like gather around Florence Pugh and like, you know, grieve with
Mhm.
her, um, as being both inherently scary, but then also like there's obviously reading, especially Midsummer, that is like the good for you type of ending. It's like good
Mhm.
for her, good for
Right.
her. Um,
Right, mhm.
but I don't know if that's
Yeah.
exactly what he meant. You know what I mean? I think he's like, this is scary.
Yeah. There's a beautiful and I forget which interview it was, but it's Lawrence Pugh or, Florence Pugh saying that at the very end, the last look, her and Ari Aster have complete opposite ideas of what she's thinking, and I think that is really
Yeah,
the key. Yes. Florence herself and, maybe people watching it will think one thing, and then Ari Aster, yeah, I
yeah.
think had some other ideas. But it's very funny it's funny you bring that up because, I'm sure you have seen, the Wicker Man remake with Nicolas
Well, of
Cage.
course.
Well, of course,
Not the bees.
not the bees. I do think that is a great example of, again, someone who is very afraid of women, the director, Neil LaBute,
I think we talked about LaBute when you were on the last time. I think
I
he
think
came up in
we did. I think
conversation.
we did. Um, yeah. Yeah, very fun. Yes, he has a very much, women are scary. This is scary.
Yeah.
Women talking about my behavior behind my back. It's terrifying. And, yeah. just a fun peek into someone's psyche while using all the tropes of folk horror to
Yeah.
do it.
Now, I have
Yeah.
absolutely no idea if this is a real thing or if it's just a coincidence and I'm picking up on it. But in both The
Mhm.
Wicker Man, the Nicolas Cage one,
Mhm.
he dresses up as a bear at some point. And then at the end of
Yeah.
Midsommar, what's his face guy is in a bear suit.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
bears have the stereotype that they are
Mhm.
attracted to certain times of the month. I
Uh-huh.
honestly, and so then he's like going, like Nicolas Cage is drop kicking women and stuff like that in a bear costume. I
Mhm.
look,
Mhm.
I'm not saying it's intentional, but it's there, is what I'm saying.
It's there. It's sometimes as artists and filmmakers, even things that we don't intend to end up in our art end
Sure.
up there. Yeah. It is really funny. And only because, a lot of the history of folk horror, yeah, is that like a very structured, rigid, often patriarchal society, and the outsider somehow being against that. Again, whether we're on their side or they're not. So yeah, it's very interesting, especially in the Wicker Man remake, to see him inventing a matriarchy that has been in existence, since whenever. Yeah, you have to do a lot of fantasy work to make any of it make sense.
Yeah.
And again, it is very interesting. They never explain why the women are isolated in the second Wicker Man. There's no, it's just seen as a given where a lot of times we get an explanation as to why the outsiders are the outsiders, or why they have isolated themselves. But yeah,
I
yeah, we
think
don't.
it's very telling
Mhm.
again in retrospect.
Mhm.
Like, because when I watched The Wicker Man, yes, the original, the OG, uh,
Mhm.
it's not just women, it is sexuality that is like
Yeah.
scary to the guy.
Yes. Even
Because
Lord Summer's Isle, when he
right,
he dresses in a dress for like the last third of it, and that is supposed to be scary. Him,
right.
not sticking to his gender norms. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
like there's that teacher who is a man who is singing about like to the kids about, it's a very silly song, but like about,
Mhm.
which is effectively all of nature is about screwing, effectively is what that's
Mhm.
about. So to me, when I watch
Mhm.
it, it's like it's only Britt Eklund who, and I guess to a lesser extent, Ingrid Pitt also are like
Mhm.
temptresses to um, Sergeant Howie, because he is
Mhm.
a buttoned up man who is super
Mhm.
patriarchal in his own. So it's the representation of it. But then of course Neil Butte watches it and goes, "Oh, it's women. It's all women are evil and scary." And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. I have an idea.
yeah.
Okay.
What
Also,
a
yeah, it's
society that doesn't need
interesting.
men. That's the scariest thing I've ever seen.
Just it's very yeah.
And of course that they have bees. They keep bees, which is,
The
one
bees,
of the most
right?
matriarchal societies in all of the animal
Mhm.
kingdom.
Mhm.
Oh boy,
Mhm.
that movie. And not only is it terrible in that sense, it's also just not a good movie. And so it just makes it all the
It's
more funny.
so bad. I do recommend, especially, if you're, you got some spare time, you've seen The Wicker Man recently, you haven't watched them like back to back, side to side. It is wow, just to see what was changed
Yeah.
and why and the decisions behind it. Fascinating, fun evening for anyone.
That was an
Yeah,
interesting
host a
time
double feature.
in Nicolas Cage time where,
Yeah.
because I don't think he's any
Yeah.
different now. He's just in better movies. Like it's all of a sudden everyone
Yeah.
just kind of gets him
Mhm.
in a way that people
Yeah.
didn't back then.
Right.
Um,
Well, and apparently he sought out Neil LaBute for the remake, and they, like, wrote it together. Yeah, they developed it together. Nicolas Cage ended up having a lot of say, especially towards the end, which is probably why it gets very, like,
yeah.
like, yeah. Yeah, very, very interesting. There is a director's commentary, unfortunately, that you can't listen to. It gives no answers. It gives no answers to any decision.
Of course.
Um, it only raises more questions, but it is out there for those curious. Yeah, and it adds another layer of horror to hear
Good gosh.
him. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get back to more fun movies, which I do think,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
for all his faults, in some fashions, I think that Ari Aster is at least a very accomplished filmmaker and does get the mood that he's going for, whether or not he succeeds in, like, the
Yes.
style, or I mean the
Totally.
like the message.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
Midsommar is like, which one? Okay, this is just a Ari Aster question.
Yeah.
Hereditary or Midsommar? Which one disturbed you more?
Um, Definitely Midsommar, but unfortunately,
Fascinating.
that still didn't someone had kinda not ruined it for me, but someone gave away, the one of the first very big surprising
I
moments
see.
to me, yeah, so, uh but yeah, even then, I do think, yeah, like, body horror, I respond to a little bit more than
Hmm.
psychological horror, which not that there isn't body horror in Midsummer, but it is, yeah, much towards the end. There's a log, slow burn
Yeah.
of, folding, intricacies that lead up to it, which yeah, even I think even Wicker Man has more, at least, animal horror sprinkled throughout it, before the end. But yeah, it was hereditary. I also think it's like, are you more afraid of, like, a family dynamic going terribly, or a, like, potential love dynamic going
Sure.
terribly? What about you,
Yeah.
though?
Well,
Which one for you? Uh-huh.
let me ask you, which one did you see first?
Okay. Hereditary.
Okay.
Yeah.
I saw
So I
so
did see that one first. Mhm.
I think more of Hereditary stuck with me, but I do think that, like,
Mm.
and mostly
Mhm.
just because it was like the exact right. I was in a screening room,
Mhm.
it was very quiet, and it was just like, you're just watching all this horrible thing, and there hadn't really been a ton
Yeah.
of movies like that. And also Toni Collette is so freaking good in that movie that it just pulls you in.
So good. I will say, yeah, a lot of the performances in
Yeah, and
Hereditary
yeah, Gabriel
are
Byrne too is also super
oh,
good.
yes, yeah.
But like, there's an aspect of Hereditary, like the plot, that I'm like,
Mhm.
this is kind of stupid. Like,
I do not like the end.
I
That's my admission.
the end, yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't I didn't think it added much, and again, that's, like, personal opinion, but I was
yeah,
like, "Meh,
yeah.
meh."
It's supposed to be
Yeah,
super, like, whatever, but like,
yeah.
Payman, that's the demon's name, because at the end they all go hail
Mm.
Payman, and it's just like, are you kidding?
Mhm. Yeah. I was like, I'm pretty sure all that other stuff was way more scary than
Yeah,
I just saw, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I
Okay.
do think ultimately Midsummer is more like, because it's just it's smiling, happy stuff that is
Yes.
horrifying to us. Everyone's just like,
Yes.
hey, just, come and take drugs with us and eat food and like all this stuff, and like,
Uh-huh.
and it is the outsiders. It's these college a-holes who are like trying to
Mhm.
use them as an anthropology paper. It's like,
Yes. Which
what are you doing?
what a great yeah, what are
Yeah,
you doing? What are you
yeah,
doing? Yeah. That
yeah.
is yes. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is my favorite of the three movies of his that I've seen so far.
Mhm. Mhm.
This is nothing. It's
Mhm.
not full core at all, but I thought Beau is Afraid is not good.
Mhm. Maybe it's his own folk horror. Like, that's his yeah.
Yeah.
It's a story he
I
tells himself, yeah.
I love a movie, and by love, you know what I mean, in quotes,
Mhm.
where I'm like, where I'm watching it, and Beau is Afraid is not a short movie. It is maybe even 3+ hours. It's a very long movie, and you're
Right,
watching all this
mhm.
horrible stuff happen to this guy, and then you get to the end, and then I go, wait, this is what the movie's about, and I was like, ugh, like that whole last
Mm,
act, I was like, are you kidding? I was so mad.
mhm.
Not
Yeah.
not to besmirch the name of the great Patty LuPone, but Jeepers Creepers, like what?
Oh, yes, yes. Patty, love you.
We
What?
can talk more in depth after we are
Yeah.
done recording, because I was just like, why did I drive downtown to watch this movie? That's what I said to
I hope
myself.
she gets another pool out of it. I hope she has a second pool now.
I wanted to just like be like, Ari, call
Mhm.
your mom. Like, just call your mom.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sure you can work it out. Whatever that was, or if you can't, that they're
That's fine
wonderful
too. Yes,
therapists.
but like
That's fine
clearly you
too,
have to work through
yes.
something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. This is
This
kind of just a
became
you thing.
yeah, right. I don't know if you know that this is not a universal thing
Yeah,
that you're
yeah,
going through.
yeah. Which is okay, but good to know.
Um, what did you see in the same token actually,
Mhm,
like the
mhm.
oh gosh, the Alex Garland movie Men? Did you see that?
I did not, but I almost watched it in for this podcast
Okay.
because yes. I figured from what I had saw, I've had it explained to me, but I
Sure.
have not seen it for myself. But I from what I understand, there are elements of that. Also, I am yes. And the same man plays several men.
Yeah.
It's there, yes,
Plays all the
an
men.
outside presence. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I have heard, and this again from secondhand, that yeah, folk horror elements.
Sure.
And I don't know if it exactly sticks the landing, but I do really like Alex Garland. So
I do
yeah,
too.
it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
I,
whether or not he really pulls it off, regardless, I do really like him as a filmmaker.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the iconography of
Hmm.
the green man as sort of like this ancient kind of pagan idea is interesting, which
Yeah.
is,
Uh
but
huh.
I,
Hmm.
it's worth seeing at least once if you like body horror. Oh,
Hmm.
again, if I'm sure you've had it
Ooh.
explained, but it's a real
Ooh.
grody one.
See for myself. All
Yeah.
right. All right. Hell yeah.
Um, another one is
Hmm.
I think it's Guatemalan. I want to make sure I get that right, but it's called
Ooh.
La Llorona. Not The Curse of La Llorona, which is a crappy
Yes.
Blumhouse movie, but
Yes. Yes.
La Llorona, which is
Uh-huh.
it is Guatemalan. Um, did you see that movie?
Yes, I
Yeah.
have,
Okay. Let's talk about
yes.
that one because I think that
Yes.
one is super
Yes.
good. And it is
Mhm.
based on a specific, the crying
Mhm.
woman, which is in
Yeah.
Central American kind of folklore, who
Mhm.
is the embodiment of like vengeance against the evils that men do to women, which is just it's so good.
Mwah, mwah, sign
Yeah.
me up, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm there, kill me.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you think of that movie?
That is I'm so glad you brought that movie,
Yeah.
it is so, so good. It definitely deserves, yeah, the to be, as canon as all the others, as far as folk horror. Um, and I do think, to contrast it with some of Ari Aster's work, like some of the best folk horror, proper folk horror, yeah, there's something like feels universal about it. Whether it mostly because they are usually hinting towards like a larger conflict that's happening,
Mm,
whether it's between two religious powers, or yeah, between two genders. There is something that's, yes, the monsters that it manifests, the environmental horror of it all. It feels familiar, and I think that's kind of the again, like, kind of just speaks to the greatness of folk horror. There's something about it that feels familiar, and that is what is often creepy about it, because the familiarity is, yeah, paganism, or something that we, thought as a society we have gotten past. Yeah, or just like inequality that, continues to manifest itself throughout
mm,
generations in history. But yeah, the idea of it being folk, the idea of it, yeah, kind of is just like reaching back into history and pulling to the front something that we're still dealing with as a society.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it is kind of comforting in a way. Like, kind of we've always been afraid of this, or dealing with this, or telling stories to each other about things that have to do with, you know, uh, women being slighted by men, or
Yeah.
yeah, something about it. Yeah, it's comforting, terrifying,
Yeah.
uh, beautiful. But yeah, this film is fantastic. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
I saw this at Sundance, the one and only time I went to Sundance,
Wow.
which was January 2020. Guess what happened later that year?
Oh
Um,
my god. Wow. That's like
um,
right right.
I know I got it right in
Ooh.
the nick of time. Um,
Yes.
but this was one of my absolute favorites that year, which I also what
Mhm.
was other movies like Promising Young Woman and like
Mm.
some other movies that
Mhm.
I didn't like as much, but like this one I
Yeah.
thought was very much like first of all, it was a time period or an event that's not that
Uh-huh.
old that I completely did not know that much about. Like, you'd think
Right.
like, why? Of course, there hasn't been a genocide since we've been born, and that's not true, obviously. Um,
Right.
and especially
Mhm.
so close to home because it's in Guatemala, which is not that far
Mhm.
from where we live. And so
Mhm.
anyway, that was really interesting. And then just seeing that like the spirit of this girl who had been murdered, who takes like the form of La Llorona, isn't
Mhm.
doing anything scary. She's just there as a reminder
She's
of these
just
horrible war
yes.
crimes this guy committed.
Yes.
And like,
Yeah, and how that is terrifying to him because, yeah, it was
yeah.
the eroding of his humanity. Yeah.
And how
Yeah.
his own
Mhm.
wife and daughter are like trying to like defend him while all these,
Mhm.
like, oh man, I was like,
Mhm.
it's such a gut punch of a movie, irrespective of it being a horror movie. Like, it's just sort of like,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
literally about the horrors of reality.
Mhm.
And I think I would love to see more horror kind of, not that I think that people need to like exploit real life atrocities, but like,
Yes, yes.
but kind of tying in folklore or
Mhm.
monsters in that way to real events. I think I've seen enough like
Mhm.
zombie Nazi movies. Like, I don't need that anymore. But like other
Right.
atrocities in the world
Yes,
or other
yes.
problems that continue.
Yes. I do think yeah, and I also think well, it's very yeah, it's interesting that that premiered alongside Promising Young Woman because I think, like, between the 2, La La Land is, like, so much more, like,
Yeah,
emotional, impactful, but yeah, again, like, speaking of yeah, like, things in the modern day that, yeah, we, like, don't wanna confront, but, yeah, have, like, very old ties as to why they happened or why it ended up that way, yeah. Yeah, again, just write it a yeah, write it of Candyman and yeah, in that folk
yeah,
horror
yeah,
way
yeah,
of like yeah, where it's like modern is speaking about, yeah, these modern problems that we have had, from, redlining and, all these terrible racist practices and, but it's like the modern meets the old. We've been doing this, forever, so, like, the history of where that horror comes from feels so, like, old and eldritch,
yeah.
and very relevant at the same time. Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's hard. You said Eldritch is a great, brought me to this. It's like I
Mhm,
get so much more on board with like cosmic horror these days because it's sort of like I feel
mhm.
existentially kind of adrift anyway, and that
Yeah.
kind of plays into it. And I do feel like there's an element of folk
Mhm.
horror that is sort of like it's eldritch in the fact that like it's like earthier. Literally, it's earthier. It's sort of
Yes.
just like
Yeah.
what if the eldritch thing was not from space far away and didn't care about us? It's literally the
Mhm.
earth itself
T
doesn't care about you and your problems
right.
and stuff like that. It feels really,
Mhm.
it's those two that I'm really like really connecting with a lot these days.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's
For good
what
or ill, I
yeah.
guess.
Gee, I wonder
Yeah, I
why
wonder why.
Yeah, we were talking about Alex Garland, yeah, Annihilation came to mind, not because it is a cosmic horror, but again, it's like it's a using something else to think about or explain, like, a deep-seated,
Mm,
fear or anxiety, um yeah, this one being, yeah, whether it is, yeah, a space thing colliding with us, like the unknown, or yeah, internally it's cancer, a thing we can't control or even understand or reason with. Yeah, again, it's very like
mm,
nature coded, but sci-fi version.
right.
And full core is over on the yeah.
And, and
Uh
and so much of both is that like, and it's so funny to me that like, Lovecraft was a horrible bigot. But
Mhm.
what works so much about that horror is not necessarily, oh, I can't describe this horrible tentacled monster. It's that he's afraid of changing within himself. And that's
Yeah.
very clear in those
Yeah.
things. And I think that like something like
Mhm.
Annihilation and certain aspects of folk horror, it's about the fear of of becoming different through your
Mhm.
environment and not you kind of like imparting yourself on your environment, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally, and what a great medium, movies, to explore that, where we have a main character that usually has to change their environment, for whatever reason, but then that existential dread of, "Does that make me different?" Or being forced to change because of the environment, yeah,
Mm,
instead of an active choice. Yeah, I think it's a great, great medium to, yeah, explore. explore those fears we
Yeah.
have. Mm-hmm.
It's so, again, like I think it was actually during lockdown or maybe right before I read,
Mm-hmm.
I finally was like, I'm finally going to read H.P. Lovecraft, and like, he's not a good writer for a very
Uh-huh.
long time, but
Yeah.
um, but then having to go like, geez, dude, like some of that stuff is the most racist you've ever read in your whole life. But then you kind of go
Yes.
like as a shut-in from a very white part of New England, like I'm not surprised, I guess is what I should say about him.
Right. Well, and also like, and I also have only read him recently
Yeah.
for research. But there is something oddly modernly refreshing that he does like straight up say, "Oh, I am racist."
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah.
and
Right.
that is like, oh, thank God, because like I think it's like at this point where have been so neoliberalism into like, well, that's not even a possibility.
Right.
So like in a weird way, it feels very like modern at this like old like something stuck up his butt guy just being like, well, yeah, I'm racist. That's probably why I'm really afraid of these like fish people. And it's just like, oh
Yeah.
my God, it's it is horrific, in a way that I don't even know if it was horrific I'm sure it was to many people reading it at the
Sure.
time, but probably not to his audience. Yeah, it just takes on like a new type of horror, just how like how, I don't wanna use the word honest, how yeah, just in the text. Yeah,
Yeah.
textually.
It's not
Yes.
hidden at all.
No, no,
No.
no. Uh-huh.
And there's
Which yeah.
reports or whatever or accounts that like later in his life
Mhm.
he lightened up a lot and stuff like that. But like if you read the stuff that he
Mhm.
wrote right after he moved back from, because he met a woman and got married and moved to Brooklyn and hated it so much that
Mhm.
when they got divorced he moved back to Providence. It's
Mhm.
like the horror at Red Hook is one of the most vile things I've ever read.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's also like this man is deeply afraid, and what is he afraid of? Just the other. He's literally
Just the other.
like, it completely makes sense to
Yes.
me when you read his fiction that it's like, yeah, he would be afraid
Mhm.
of everything.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And it also I mean, I think also that speaks to why there are so, many modern interpretations of
Sure.
Lovecraft, especially even from like a black perspective, because yeah, it's right there in the text. Like he calls
Yeah.
himself racist. There it's at least something we can, go off. Yeah, there's not like that modern deniability about it.
No. And obviously
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it,
Oh.
but like if you out there listening were to Google HP Lovecraft cat name, don't be surprised with what you find,
At
is all
your
I'm
own
saying.
yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
clear your browsing history afterwards if you're on a work computer.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's
Um
funny, yeah, it's funny to see someone's fears so on their sleeve, and I think that is also a thing that is great about folk horror because I think a
yeah.
lot of the characters, that is
Oh
what
yeah.
they do. Whether, yeah, it's the fear of, yeah, paganism, women, animals, environments, not being in control,
Yeah.
whatever it is, usually we see our characters, handling it either poorly or
Mhm.
well, depending on which one you're watching, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. The horror
It's
of the
inside
folk.
all of us.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Mhm.
Well, I mean, honestly, I feel like we could do a whole nother episode about this. Like maybe next year, let's do a part 2 or something
Yeah.
like that. But
Let's do a cosmic horror next year. Put it
great
on,
call. Let's do it. Put it on the
put it on the
docket.
books.
We're doing it.
Great.
Maggie, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have anything you'd like to plug?
Yes. Well, you can check out my YouTube channel. We are almost done with our Wicker Man video, so either by the time this comes out or very soon afterwards,
Sure.
we will have, yes, a wonderful video essay for you all about both the OG Wicker Man and the Nicolas Cage Wicker Man. So
Incredible.
get ready for that. Yeah. And then, yeah, just Maggie Mae Fish on social media, Instagram. It's kind of the only one I use now, but I'm on the other
I
ones.
know. I'm only on Instagram these days.
Yeah,
Everything else makes
yeah,
me sad. And even
yeah,
in
I
Instagram
know.
kind of makes me sad too, but
Me too. None of them are good.
none of them are good. At least you get some
But
cat
yeah,
photos once in a while.
yes, yes, and that I can promise I will provide. I have two very adorable cats, so if you need that in your life, feel free to follow.
Absolutely. Same
Yeah.
likewise. Folks, you can follow me on Instagram and look at pictures of my million cats that we have, at functional_nerd. You can follow me on Letterboxd. I think Maggie's also on Letterboxd. You can follow me there on Kyle_Anderson, and I think you're just Maggie Mae Fish, correct?
Yep.
All right. Well, happy horror season, everybody. Hope you're enjoying Nerdoween/spooky season. Thank you again to Maggie Mae Fish for joining me. I've been Kyle Anderson. Join me again next time on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit Nerdist.com.